Welcome, everyone. Just a little bit of housekeeping. It can get a little noisy in here, so the best way, if you struggle to hear us in some sort of way, and I lost my voice, so I get, you get the sultry lounge voice today, the headsets on your seats, you can throw those on if you want a little bit more of a clearer sound. So if you're in the right place, what we're exploring today is as we see AI systems become faster, they're becoming a little bit more reliant, fluent, we're becoming increasingly comfortable and confident. We get to ask today more around the level of what if intelligence isn't actually about certainty, but knowing when to pause, when to reflect, when to ask and say, maybe we don't know. And so this is really the exciting piece. What we hope and what I hope that you'll all leave with is probably more questions than answers. That's kind of the favorite part of uncertainty. But we get to delve into this with this amazing, amazing group that we have here. And we'll have an opportunity to discuss here, and then there will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions as well. And so before I start, I'd recommend you guys do your reading of the bio, but I just need to fangirl over this amazing panel that I have here today. So I'm going to sort of bounce around. I'm going to start with Maggie. I had the pleasure of meeting Maggie actually at South by Southwest, and she's a bit of the inspiration for this panel because in her book Uncertain, which there is a book signing up on 2 immediately after this, in the last chapter, she started talking about unsure AI, not as a theoretical concept, but actually as things that's already happening, AI pioneers that are digging in on what are uncertain AI systems. And so Maggie herself is a well-recognized journalist, commentator, and scholar. And this book, Uncertain, is one of many that she's had in sort of this trilogy where she's got this commentary around some social trends in our interaction sort of between humans and digital life. And so Uncertainty digs into sort of some of those social elements and sort of the potential of uncertainty with that. And I always like a bit of a fun fact. Maggie also swims regardless of the weather in the ocean most days. So if you were around, you might have seen her in that. And so it's a number of different books, and it's been a pleasure to be able to connect with Maggie. And then we've got these other amazing people. Wakanyi Hoffman, she's an Indigenous AI scholar out of Utrecht University in the Netherlands currently, where she focuses on a number of different things, from bringing Ubuntu knowledge into some of the learnings and really sort of AI and plural intelligence systems. I could go through a long list of what else she is involved in, from the IDGs as a board member, working with citizen assemblies, you name it. But this lovely woman is amazing and really brings this voice of also children and where are they in sort of playing in this intelligence systems. And last but not least is Dr. Pat Pataranutaporn, and I probably butchered that. But the first thing I want to say is congratulations on becoming a full professor this fall at MIT Media Lab.
Thank you so much.
No problem. And so Pat is part researcher, part technologist, and prototyper in a number of different places, and has played in the Fluid Interface Lab, but also your dissertation and a lot of work around cyborg intelligence and how we start to design systems between human and AI. And if you've read up about any of his stuff from the Wearable Reasoner or the Future You program, there's a lot of exciting elements, but it's bringing that really sort of applicable and sort of tangible technical side of things into this. So I could talk about them for days, but what we really want to start with is this grounding in what is uncertainty, because sometimes that's a little bit confusing before we delve into maybe the light and the dark side of some of this certainty and uncertainty. And Maggie, I'd love for you to start with that.
Sure, thank you so much, and thank you to the forum for all their hard work putting this together, and to my fellow panelists. I'm so honored to be with you, and special shout out to Sabrina for all her hard work in putting this together as well. Yes, defining uncertainty is probably a good idea for multiple reasons, not least because the concept is seen as so muddy and so negative so often. I'll start with a definition, and then I want to just mention about why it's so timely today to be talking about uncertainty, and again, not just because we have so many worries centered around that word. The word is almost like a lamentation in the news and around the kitchen table, but also it's timely on multiple other fronts. Then I'll just mention just a little bit about how I came to Unsure AI and why, putting uncertainty together with AI is not about self-driving cars spinning in circles or chatbots that literally are baffled forever. It's really a movement and a concept that's extraordinarily important for our human future. So the definition is pretty easy, actually. Despite many taxonomies in different disciplines, many approaches and vocabularies, there are really basically two meta forms of uncertainty. Experts generally agree that, and they make sense. They make common sense to the way we live our lives. There's aleatory uncertainty, first of all, which is basically the shorthand for what we call the uncertainty, or the unpredictability or volatility out there. And that's really just the human, the fact that humans can't fully know. So I like to use an example related to weather. So commonly we are faced with a prediction of a storm coming our way, despite the probabilistic reasoning and the predictive modeling and AI, et cetera, we don't really know where the storm will land or what damage it'll do. That's aleatory uncertainty. We can't, humans fully know, despite the fallacy that we carry within us often throughout history that we do. So the second major type of uncertainty is epistemic, so our psychological uncertainty, and that's really just the human response to the unknown. So, whenever a human or many organisms meet up with something new, unexpected, or ambiguous, they literally get the chance, they can meta-cognitively recognize that they've reached the edge of their knowledge. This is not ignorance, it's edge work. It's reaching the edge of what you know, and that carries with it a sense of unease, discomfort, literally scientifically called good stress or arousal, because we humans evolved to need answers, and limbo is not what we want. So we're uncomfortable in a provocative and positive way. And yet, we're also faced with the space of possibilities that is uncertainty. So when you're unsure, you are spurred to investigate, to explore, to be curious, and that's really where the potential lies. And I think it's timely not just because there are so many negative ideas in and around uncertainty. It's synonymous with weakness and inertia in so much of contemporary culture. Technology offers us the idea, the fallacy that answers are clickable and can be gathered instantly. And also volatility is rising according to many barometers. So it's important now that we reset, reframe our understanding of uncertainty. And the last point I'll make is that, so therefore, the push to redesign AI to be unsure of its aims or goals, to reimagine the traditional rationalist, very narrow view of intelligence upon which it's based, is highly, highly critical, not only for the human who's interconnected, whose thoughts are co-authored increasingly, but for the very nature of AI that we are contending with today. And so that's how I came to follow the unsure AI as part of a global push to recognize the strengths of uncertainty.
Yeah, and I like what you often sort of talk about. Uncertainty is actually a feature, not a flaw in these sort of things. But we continue to design AI systems and kind of celebrate them as being decisive, fast, confident. Like, where is the certainty in that system failing us? Maybe you can start with that, Wakanyi, and some of your thoughts in that space.
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and thank you, Maggie, for grounding us in the definition of uncertainty. I just want to, just before I respond to
Absolutely.
that question.
This is the best dinner conversation in the world, so I'll let you guys just, riff as we go.
I'll start with the response.
Perfect,
I think one of the things we're doing is focusing so much on what we can know, what we can predict, what we can build in order to be more efficient and faster and get quicker answers, which, of course, as we know, that's not really possible.
Yeah.
So I want to start with something that Maggie said was how uncertainty actually lands in our bodies, the anxiety that that causes, and the reaction thereafter is to try and predict more of what to expect in order to, I mean, that's like a default movement, right? And so when we do that, though, what we're assuming is that in us there is this inherent capability to be in control of the future. But in order to be in control of the future, you also have to be in the future, which we know that that's obviously not possible, to be living in the future, right? So it's an imagined outcome that you're bringing to yourself right now. But if we take now AI as it is built, if that is a logic of the creator behind the AI, that I can use a certain data set, amount of data, particular data, that will help me predict the outcome of a particular situation. The algorithm is supposed to help resolve a particular problem and create more efficient, better working human beings. Then the assumption behind that as well, behind that creator, is that they have it in themselves to have this scope, this field of vision of what a better functioning or flourishing life is for everyone. Now imagine the amount of responsibility is on that creator. So I talk about Ubuntu, which is this concept of being human from an African philosophical standpoint. And it's not really a philosophy, it's an embodied intelligence, a relational intelligence, which demands that you return back to yourself. So rather than predicting what the future, rather than being concerned about the uncertainty of what you don't know, which is already unknown, right? It's more about predicting how you are best prepared to be in that unknown, whatever that unknown is. So it's less about what that field of not knowing looks like, but more about what is in me, what are the capabilities in me, the skills that I need to develop in order to be resilient enough to be able to cope with the unknown. And that's a very different kind of AI model if we were to design around that, knowing yourself fully, capable of being in the future.
That's super interesting, and I wanted to pin on something that you just said. It was this assumption that the creator has a wide enough view. Like, is that a valid assumption that one creator can create a system that provides that vast view?
Well, Pat and I were actually having a conversation in the back there, and we were talking about, I said to him, I call it this kaleidoscopic view, which we all have the bias, right? We're all biased. We all have our own ideas of the future. Now imagine whose idea is going to best predict the best future for 8 billion people. That's just impossible. So we're actually going through the more of the same ideas being fabricated so that we can continue to predict more of the same outcome, which is not possible, as Maggie said, because predicting the future is just actually not a possibility that we can have in the present moment. But we can predict how we are going to be best prepared, and that's an individual pursuit as well as a collective, so checking in on each other as well.
What were some of your thoughts in that conversation?
Yeah, I think this is a very timely topic because we are living in a great uncertainty right now. We don't know what's going to happen to our future, right? And especially in the context of AI, I think there's a great debate whether we are living in an AI bubble or not, or whether the bubble will burst or not, right? I think that's the great uncertainty that many of the investors and maybe some of the people in this room were thinking about. One thing that I do know is that regardless whether this is a bubble or not, I think AI have fundamentally changed the nature of human, the way that we think, the way that we live. And I think that to me is a really important question. Maybe it's not about whether we can have AI bubble or not, but maybe more about how does the AI help people navigate uncertainty, right? I think one of the major use case that we've seen is that a lot of people are using chatbot to predict their future, to role play, like tarot card or like different kind of superstition. Because I think, right now there are a lot of uncertainty and people want some kind of certainty in life, right? And then the question is, what do you do with the AI prediction? Do you follow it? Or do you actually, don't follow it at all, right? And what is the basis of that prediction? I mean, in some domain, like in healthcare, we see a lot of modeling on you can put risk factor and then model, the longevity of the person or whether the person might have certain disease condition or not, right? We see a lot of advancement in that kind of predictive power to reduce the uncertainty. But at the same time, if you take that too much, then, your life is basically an autocomplete. The AI become the autocomplete for life. Right. So we did one project called Future You, the one that you mentioned, where we are interested in sort of can we use AI to help people imagine their future self. And there is one caveat there is that we are not creating a prophecy where this is the future and there's nothing uncertain about this. We said that this is one of many possibilities, and we encourage people to use the tool to prototype or to imagine a broader possibility for themselves. We work with psychologists who think a lot about future self-continuity, and we use AI to use data of a personal data or a person to create a model of what their life might be in the future so they can see that more vividly. And we have shown that it has positive outcome on human decision and also reduce anxiety as well. I think because if you have so many choices and you cannot see each of them clearly, it's become very difficult to make decision, right?
Well, and what I experienced, and I'll let you go, Maggie, was that we as humans struggle to be able to view our future self. So like,
Right.
how does that fuel some of our uncertainty? It was really fascinating, and I'd recommend anyone checking it out, because you were saying that it's like people from over 190 countries have
Right.
now started to use and contribute to this research.
Right.
Maggie, you were itching for something.
Yeah, I think it's such a great example of what I call unsure AI, and which comes in many different iterations. And I think one of the enormous themes about the awakening or renaissance or discovery of uncertainty, which has been overlooked as a field of study, even in psychology. It's been seen as something to eradicate, so even the task orientation of psychology has lent itself to ignoring really what uncertainty is and how it works in the brain for a long time. But one of the themes coming out of this new science of uncertainty is the multiplicity of possibilities, as I mentioned, the space of possibilities that emerges when we are able to understand and wield, I like to say, wield uncertainty as a tool. Behaviorally in the business world, one really gold standard study showed, a longitudinal study showed that CEOs in the middle of a long-term crisis who were ambivalent were actually the ones that emerged to be more inclusive. They sought the multiplicity of perspectives of those around them to get through this problem, and then they also were more resourceful, as opposed to CEOs who were sure of what to do and felt in control of the situation. They tended to actually do almost nothing at all, and the situation was doubling in the marketplace of the EU, which was the opposite of Brexit, a really big challenge. So that inertia comes from being certain, not uncertain, which is really important. And in the field of unsure AI, this idea of Yoshio Bengio at Mila has been working on multiple different fronts, but on projects that seek proteins that could become antibiotics. That when the model is designed to be unsure, it offers transparently the human multiple paths to recognizing proteins rather than seeking that one reward-centric linear path. You can see the possibilities, because then uncertainty offers the second chance, the second look, and that's really, again, opening up. So I think the multiplicity of how people think and what people think, and I also just want to talk a little bit about the downside to using chat books, but we can save that.
We could probably have
I want
an
to talk
entire
about
session
the
just on that.
sycophantic nature of some of what.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, I think it was really interesting. Like, sometimes I think uncertainty is really important, but in some cases, like, during COVID, if we are uncertain about our medical knowledge, and if the AI keep pushing this uncertainty, it could create misinformation and conspiracy belief. I'm curious how you all think about that, like the negative side of making people unsure about science or some of the important facts that,
Yeah. Well, and Wakanyi, but I'll just say also that it's important to understand that uncertainty has guardrails and limitations. Uncertainty is not for the routine. It's for complex, new, unexpected situations. It's so that humans can rise to the occasion. When you're unsure, your working memory goes up. Your brain becomes more receptive to data. Uncertainty needs to have to guardrails. We don't want people to be unsure of where their next meal is coming from. Uncertainty is something that we can wield judiciously and productively. It's not something that we want to have a limitlessness, and the degree of threat involved also is important too.
And I just want to add, based on that, uncertainty is not about not believing in scientific discoveries that have taken, hundreds of years even to confirm, right? It is, I think the deception lies in the idea that we can control the outcome in the future based on where we are right now. So that's the deception that I think we need to work around, how people are getting deceived into thinking that the answer that they got out of a chatbot, that they got out of an LLM, an algorithm that is certain, right? That's absolutely certain. I think there is need to open up the field for confirming your biased perspective with other human beings, and then having that feedback loop with the chatbot or whatever it is, to see whether there is a shared consensus around a particular topic, rather than having more of the same confirmed to you from your very biased kaleidoscopic perspective.
Well, Pat, even as you bring that up, your work is around sort of designing human AI systems for human flourishing. So one part that comes to mind when you speak of it is like that the AI is the oracle, and it has the answers. So when it spews this information out, I'm curious to play out that a little bit with you. Is like we're still sort of designing for this level of certainty and AI having the answers. Like, what are some of the key elements to your work around sort of how do we design for an element of human flourishing? And I've got a question for you to couple into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question. I think you can answer that in two layers. I think now, right, a lot of people are racing to build super intelligence, and they think that that's the only path forward, right? That everything is kind of pointing toward the direction. And what I'm afraid about is that if we are only focused on the super intelligent machine, we will create super stupid human or super stupid society, because we don't understand the impact of that narrow view of technology on the human society, right? I mean, my colleague at Oxford coined this term, which I think perfectly described this, right? The idea of autocomplete for life, that the algorithm will have the best next step for everyone, and the only thing you do is just follow that step. And then you need to question, what is that for? Who is benefiting from this? Is there like a hidden agenda behind that, right? As we've seen a lot of work showing that AI model now are sort of representing the political view of the creator of the model. So I think that is something very dangerous about believing there's only one path to technological development. And then the second question that I think you asked about, the idea of human flourishing, I think that's sort of the research agenda we're doing at MIT, which is like to go beyond optimizing the AI for the outcome. And this is what we just talked about as well, that if you only focus on the model performance, you're going to create benchmark that tests, how well does the model, do mathematical reasoning, or how well does the model answer like medical question or laws question. But then you may not know how often does the model encourage someone to kill themselves, which had led to some of the many tragic outcomes that we've seen, right? So we are rethinking the way that we measure the model and looking at this sensitive area. Can we, come up with new tests that measure, if someone come in with really sensitive topic, would the model steer them, toward becoming more healthier, or does it actually confirm or reaffirm their sort of negative or harmful behaviors, right? And I think to me that's a really important question.
Which is particularly interesting as we talk about flourishing
Right.
in a track called optimizing systems.
Right.
Maybe optimizing is the bad word.
Yeah.
But it like comes back to when I think of the human flourishing and I hate to say it's like the human in the loop. You did share a story beforehand around how we measure wind. And like this sort of element of like, do we defer to the technology? Can the technology do it all for us? Or is there an openness of like where the human plays in this?
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. What does it take to flourish? What is human flourishing really? I think three things. Firstly, we flourish best when we are in right relationship with ourselves, right? That knowing who you truly are, right? That's the rule number one, right? Know thyself, right? So it's the rule of thumb in pretty much every culture, spiritual expression, whatever, right? Philosophers, Greek philosophers sat with this question for years. And then the second relationship is relationship with each other. And the third one is relationship with the planet. So going back to that question, what is human flourishing? It's from what can an AI model do to help us get into right relationship with ourselves, right relationship with each other, and right relationship with the planet? I think that kind of model would not be predicting how best we can perform these tasks, but it's also how best we can relate. So can we have a model, and maybe that's a question more for Pat, that can help us not optimize, but improve the conditions of this right relationship, which is a constant self-improvement project, and also a constant collective improvement project that isn't telling us that we're going to get to a certain future, a certain version of the future that's based on one person's idea or a group of ideas based on the data set that's been used to train it, which is also based on one lens, right? So when you're talking about that relational field, there are multiple ways of relating with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet. And so that requires us to also really investigate and question where the data that's coming to train these models is actually coming from. I think that's the biggest elephant in the room that we're all grappling with. Who is designing these models, and based on what perspective, what worldview of the world? Because we have multiple views of the world based on where the knowledge is coming from.
And is there a view where like the human doesn't need to be in the loop? Like where, I know it's a big question, and maybe you threw out a question to Pat, but I go back to that story you told me about how regardless, like the models can't predict wind patterns, but humans who have been in the outdoors, that they inherently through sort of their experiences have done. And so like that's my question of like, do we have to sort of reorient a little bit of like, can we actually build full systems and just get to that level of assumption?
I would hope not.
And maybe you could share, like I've had the
not,
privilege of talking to you beforehand, but sharing a little bit of that anecdote as well.
Mm-hmm. So as soon as I'm done with this forum, I'll be heading out to Namibia, where I'll be on the bush with the Bushmen. And these are the last remaining trackers of the world. There is a great book called The Origins of Science, which is actually traced back to our ideas of science. The way in which we developed scientific inquiry or research in science actually came from our ability to track, to be in right relationship with nature. That's the original reason as to why we became scientists. The human became a scientist. And so based on that, and the story that I shared with you is that there was, in all across Africa, we're really grappling with issues of climate change in real time, right? And we're also grappling with wildlife depletion. All the poly crises are being felt in real time on the African continent. And one of the interesting things was with tracking wildlife patterns. So a group of Khoisan trackers were given an equipment that was AI generated or using AI technology to help predict the pattern on the ground of where the animals have been, which kinds of animals are around, that sort of thing. And what they found is that that particular tool or technology could not predict the pattern on the ground in the same way that the Khoisan trackers could do. And this is because they've had thousands of years of understanding even a shift in the element, a shift in the wind. So wind is one of those funny things that we are still unable to predict something appropriately or fully, because we can't predict the pattern that happens on top of a footprint of or maybe like an elephant or a lion based on the direction of the wind. So I don't think based on this that we can fully remove the human in the loop. But what we can do, what is actually happening, is that our relationship to the natural conditions, the natural environment, is shifting dramatically. when we are more and more removed from our natural environment. So our ability to remember that we have this intelligence in us might be the problem, but not so much our ability to not be in right relationship. We need to relate better with the environment.
Yeah, and also, once I was doing a talk about a different book called Distracted, and I threw out, just to show that this constant idea that we have more information. Well, it depends on how we define information. So I just threw out the idea to this, I think it was a PTA group, and parent-teacher group, and I said, a goose has just as much information. And the audience looked at me as if I was completely crazy. It did not go over well, but I still hold that the goose has just as much information or knowledge. But I also want to say that, along with putting on the radar screen the fact that the answers we get from AI and from technology in general are the statistically average, the prevalent, the commonality. So, and actually training AI on data that's diverse only solves part of the problem because the system is made for commonality. So you can train a system on data about doctors who are female because AI systems often think doctors are obviously a he. And yet you won't get a system that recognizes they, people who are non-binary, et cetera. So there's many, many layers to this. And I think also, just to back up a little bit, but also to make a kind of an umbrella point about humans in the loop, I'm really concerned, and I think studies are increasingly showing about what I call the deference trap. So biologists find that working with AI, the system will run with their initial hunch, therefore not checking whether or not there are errors in the biology. So as a useful tool, a co-author of research, that's a error-prone way to work, and people in science are worried about that. When people in business are working with AI and chat GPT, et cetera, models, they find that the chat GPT is offering this commonality of knowledge and then moving the human toward a deference toward homogeneous kind of average type writing. And what's actually helpful is that people rate these systems as easy but less rewarding. And I think the less rewarding is actually useful because that gives me hope. Because what uncertainty really does is provokes you to realize, to jolt from your assumptions, to recognize that you are in a certain category and maybe you're in between another category, or et cetera. So our uncertainty is an antidote to the deference that we pay AI and that it pays us, the over-trust that we give one another, which has been happening for hundreds of years, automation bias. But I think uncertainty is a two-way jolt away from this really sycophantic nature of the systems, which is really risky when you're when you're dealing with psychological issues and things like that.
Right, and I totally agree. But I think as a scientist, we also think that there are ways that AI could help humans sort of, be more open to uncertainty as well. For example, in one of our studies, we look at what happened when people interact with Socratic AI, the AI that don't provide the answer, but ask questions, so people arrive at the answer themselves. And what we found is that people actually, be able to distinguish like fake news and true news better than the AI always telling them the answer, because it kind of prompt them to think, right? In a scientific term, we have a term called cognitive forcing function, that the AI should not just help people offload all the cognitive thinking, but actually promote their cognitive process, right? That's why it's called cognitive forcing function. That's one of many methods that have been developed to really deploy AI. So I think it's going back to your point that it's not just about getting better model. I think one of the paradox is that better model make it difficult to spot when it's wrong, because it covers its track very, very well. It can provide, we also have a study showing that when AI provides false justification, when it sort of gaslight you or trying to justify fake information, people actually make worse decisions than not having that at all.
Yeah.
So when you have better model, it can also make it more difficult to distinguish true and false reasoning,
It's
right?
hard to be able to do that.
And going back to your point, that's why I think AI is an interaction question, not just the model or intelligence question as well.
So, so taking this seriously, if we're looking at designing for doubt, for impermanence, for this sort of co-learning, all those sort of pieces, like what does this look like in practice? And we might not be able, we'll start, I know you all have thoughts, but like if we're designing for uncertainty in these systems, what are some things that we should be thinking about?
Well, many things. One, we should understand the human psychology and incorporate that as part of, AI. We did a collaboration with OpenAI to try to understand, model behavior and human behavior and how they're influencing one another. And we found that even in one model, they could have sometimes pro-social behavior, sometimes anti-social behavior. So if you don't understand sort of the what is actually good for human, you might have this sort of model that have like random or inconsistent model behavior that can lead to negative outcome. Second, I think you need to sort of optimize for things that really matter, not just optimize for accuracy or optimize for math reasoning, but optimize for human outcomes. Like in this case, how do you handle uncertainty? Like I think when you look at the name of the session, right, can intelligence thrive without certainty? It's not just artificial, it's also human intelligence as well. And in my group, we focus a lot on cyborg intelligence. This is the combined intelligence between the two. How can we make sure that when human plus AI is more than just AI or human by itself? And in many cases, we see that when humans work with AI, the performance degrades significantly. So a lot of work needs to be done in that. And then I think the last part is that you need to have more diverse team. Right now, AI development usually have like AI engineers, but we need philosophers. We have people with different epistemology, thinker from many disciplines, scientists, artists, designer, policymaker to be part of the conversation, because AI is not just an engineering challenge, it's a humanity challenge.
So, like quickly, why don't we already bring that into the fold now?
Well, Dubai is already doing that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really positive here. But I think, the work on human-AI interaction is still relatively new. A lot of people only focus on AI, but I think now that we're kind of facing this sort of, question of the AI bubble, I think now is the time that we rethink the AI challenge a little bit and think beyond what the AI can do, but what it is doing to us. I think that's the question we should be asking.
Definitely. Wakanyi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pat, for that. I think that one of the challenges we have with AI is how it's come into the public domain as this godlike model, this one large language model that all of us can pigeonhole our thoughts and ideas and realities into. Now what's happening is that there is a growing field of diversifying that field and asking ourselves, can we have smaller models that are tailored towards certain smaller data sets? And through that, then we can start to see what are the multiple realities that we coexist in. And this is a far better way of looking at humanity as a whole. I know for sure, for certain, across the African continent, this is the conversation that we're having, is that we need small AI or small language models that capture different realities for different groups of people. Africa's got more than 2,000 languages spoken on the continent. How are we going to have one language model that serves, all the 1.5 billion people on the continent? So being able to understand that there are different ways that we come into the world, different intelligent systems, indigenous knowledge systems, have not even entered this public domain of AI in that sense, coming from the researchers themselves and not from sort of this very Western Anglo-centric lens that has created the data sets that we have now that have been fed into the large language models, including synthetic data. Like, why do we even need synthetic data? Because we don't have enough data to continue feeding the models, the current models that we have. And so that is a challenge for developers. And I appreciate what you said about bringing philosophers in the group, bringing entrepreneurs, bringing different kinds of people that showcase a diverse collective experience of society, and not just sort of the the business behind it or the funders behind the AI systems. I think what we're asking for is, can we have other forms of knowledge that influence the way that we build these intelligent systems?
So principles for you.
Yes, well, too many to list in our remaining time, but
A short list,
yeah, the reason I'm referencing the deference trap is because it's not out there in the world. There are such fantastic efforts in laboratories, but yet the major AI that people are working with, that they are spending time with, falls so short of not just listening to different voices. There's only one large, of the 109 major LLM models today, only one comes from the global south, Egypt. Yeah, I read also that of the 13,000 different medicinal plants in the world, most are actually known about or available, the knowledge is available in one language, one unique language, and yet we are 40% of one of the most common data sets upon which AI is trained is made up of English, even though English only makes up 20% of the world's speakers. So the problem is there. I would say add to the principles that we need, other than to fully investigate uncertainty as humans, to teach it. It's a skill. It's not just a provocation. It's a space of possibility in which we can be productively, skillfully unsure, and that's something we need to learn. We need to be bringing uncertainty into AI and learn about how to do so better. But also, one of the points that we didn't talk about that could be a whole panel is the way in which uncertain AI lends itself to more honesty and transparency. So we need to know when we're dealing with a bot. People who spend the most time online are actually the least good at recognizing they're dealing with a bot. They tend to think it's a human. There's a lot we could say about that. That's not the final story. But when one tiny story in neuroscience, a roboticist told me about honesty and why unsure AI gives us honesty and transparency. Often systems are built to hide the probabilistic reasoning and give that answer that the human wants and craves. If you have a cop robot that's chasing a suspect with a human police person, and the cop robot under traditional AI will just say, shoot or arrest. Unsure AI will reveal that there's a 70% chance that that person is the suspect. The human then can be more in the loop about changing that. So honesty and transparency is really a part of unsure AI. And I personally want to be highly aware and use all my powers of uncertainty when I engage in AI. It's still a process that we need to work on.
Right. So as you can imagine, we could talk about this for a very long time, but we have a couple minutes, so I can take a couple questions, but I'm going to prime you guys. I'd love to finish the conversation with your main thought of, if you had to sell unsure AI versus the AI systems that maybe we're seeing now, what sort of value would you connote with this, like why we should go in this direction? I'm going to preview with that, and we'll probably take 2, maybe 3 questions depending on sort of the richness of those questions. Is there anyone in the audience that has a question for this amazing group here?
Good afternoon. I'm Claudia Kapelau from Namibia, Standard Bank, Namibia. It's a 2-bedroom house, so when you arrive, let me know. My question is around trying to, garner some kind of collaboration in organizations that aren't necessarily composed of other futurists. I think there's a certain level of comfort with uncertainty in this room. We're kind of the choir. But in certain organizations, there is almost a demand for you to be able to give answers. My specific line manager understands what he's employed, but I need to support the rest of the organization who are not converted. So I just wanted to understand also from your own experience and background and your comfort with uncertainty, how do you go about trying to create that level of comfort with the rest of the organization? And how do you make them also understand that reaching that point of certainty, that journey between not knowing and getting to a point of certainty, is a collaborative effort, that futurists in the organization are not magic 8 balls.
Yes, I've talked to a lot of organizations, worked with organizations. I think one of the ways we can start is first by recognizing and honoring the incremental nature of gaining skill in uncertainty. So for instance, there's a personality trait that's getting a lot of attention, tolerance or intolerance of uncertainty. In a nutshell, people who are intolerant of uncertainty are more rigid. During COVID, they saw denial versus acceptance. People who are tolerant of uncertainty see it as a challenge, not a threat. When clinical psychologists are now literally treating the most intractable anxiety successfully just by bolstering people's intolerance of uncertainty, they use incremental steps based on exposure therapy, just bite off a little more of the unknown. So in a team, in an organization, a person could be asked to delegate a little more. They could be asked to try something new. I mean, that's not rocket science, but it works, and it actually has a spillover effect. The second most important part about understanding how to wield uncertainty and move away from the idea that's fear, the discomfort is not fear, is to understand the communications value or issue related to. When you say a leader should be unsure, people often think that the doctor will walk into the room and say, "You have cancer." I don't know. And that's not what unsure AI, any more than self-driving cars that are going in circles. A doctor who says, you have a diagnosis, I'm going to be consulting 2 world experts, is linking uncertainty to potential, and that's really powerful, studies show. And so, and I talk about the words called hedge words, like maybe, sometimes, could. Contrary to our assumptions, they are actually seen as signaling approachability. The word maybe does 2 things. It signals that you're receptive to others' points of view, and it signals there's something more to know, which is so important for learning. So those are a couple of ways in which we can work with organizations.
I would quickly add to that is so when you're dealing with teams and you're trying to make sure to mitigate the anxiety that comes around the ideas of uncertainty, there are 2 questions that you need to ask yourself. The first one is, what are we uncertain about? What is that, can we map out our uncertainties? What are those scenarios? And the second question is not what we can do about it, but who do we need to become in order to deal with the possibilities of any outcomes. And then based on that, what we need to become, we amplify the capabilities, the capacities that we need to build within the team in order to be fully prepared for any possible scenario, rather than saying, let's deal with the fear by controlling the possibility of this outcome. But what if you get a different outcome? Then you're not prepared for that. So I would bet more on the building up the capacity to be able to deal with any possible outcome. So the human experience is what I'm more concerned about, rather than the experience with uncertainty itself.
Yeah, so we are tight on time because there's another session coming in right after this. So Wakanyi and Pat are going to be sticking around afterwards. We'll have the don't rush the stage sort of thing. Maggie will be going up to her book signing as well. Another down. Well, actually it is up, I think. Yeah, so up to level 2 for the book and play corner. But it was that last question, and because I spend a lot of time with companies, with businesses who are, like just deploying AI as rapidly as they possibly can with this sort of bubble, how would you convey quickly like the value of something like an unsure AI to them overlooking where they're looking today?
Well, I would say uncertainty AI for uncertain time.
Oh,
Make
beautiful.
it rhyme a little bit.
Yeah.
And I would say that uncertainty is wisdom in motion, and it's the ability to get to the better answer, not the first insufficient answer.
So how would you connote value of something like an uncertain AI or an unsure AI based off of the design principles that you guys talked about? Like, how would you justify, like, don't go for this sort of certain AI, go for this. So maybe it's a bit as a sales pitch, but yeah.
Well, the unknown is already unknown. So what can be known is the experience that you're going to have with the unknown. And I think I value more that experience. So I would rather be interacting with an AI that actually questions my reality far more than gives me an answer about the expected reality.